Here it is for you guys. Enjoy.
Welcome to We the Thunder. I'm Shooter, and we're here with Thomas Schooley. Classes in session. Another week of Lightning Hockey. Another episode of We the Thunder. Coming at you December 11th, 2024. You just checked the date there.
I did. It's like, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's December, and we're in the spirit of giving. Right, Thomas Schooley?
That's right.
Some tickets. We're going to announce how to win those. If you're following us on X, you already know. It's already out there. We just posted it. And we're going to give away a subscription to the hottest website on the internet because we got them here on the show. We've got the Lightning insider, Mr. Erik Erlendsson. He's been covering the team for 175 years now. I don't know if you guys know that, but he's been covering the team before I even moved to Florida and became a fan of this team. So we're always happy to have him on. Look at this. What we're even going to do is we will give him the big square. Look at that. Smaller. Welcome to your home. The spoon collection is growing. Someday we're going to get you a spoon. We the Thunder spoon for the collection.
Yeah. Just checking. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I saw you messing with different things down there. You were looking so lost, and I was like, I don't know if he can hear us. And then finally, when he said, "Yeah, 175 years," I saw the smile on your face. I was like, "Okay, good. He can hear us."
Well, I was having problems with my mic. It wasn't giving me an option to test the microphone volume, which had me worried because I use this for the broadcast too. I was like, oh, something went wrong, but no, that's good. Okay.
Well, we don't test anything around here. We just do it. So before we really get started, and we're going to say this a couple times because not everyone's here yet, but if you look below, I'll leave this on here every once in a while. We'll mention it a couple times. By the end of this episode, we're going to give away a subscription to lightninginsider.com. So all you have to do is add #insider to your quote. That should say comment. I don't know why it says quote, but yeah, you can quote something in your comment if you'd like. So start adding that #insider. Somebody's going to get a subscription to Lightning Insider. And we'll talk a little bit later about what we're going to do to give out tickets for next Tuesday's game. The Bolts will be back in town to play the Columbus Blue Jackets. But Erik Erlendsson, we've had you on this show many times before. We appreciate it.
I appreciate the time. I always tell people, if you're inviting me back, that means I must have done something okay.
It's always fun. It's always fun. We haven't had you on this season yet. So I really want to kind of get your take on this 2024 version of the Lightning so far. You know, what has been kind of the surprises, if any, for you? And just what's your impression of the team now that we are, 2 months into the season? We kind of think we know what we're looking at here.
Well, I think the first place we have to start, obviously, the big absence in Steven Stamkos and how the team was going to handle life without number 91 in the locker room and on the ice, and obviously such a large presence with the franchise for so long, going back to when he was first overall pick in 2008, and what he meant to the team, the franchise, the community, everything else. I mean, there's still a void there. It's something you're never really going to replace. And, I think it helped that the fact that Nashville came to town so early in the season at the end of October, to kind of get all of those emotions out of the way. And I don't know if you want to call it officially closing the page or, turning the page, changing the chapter, whatever analogy and metaphor you want to use. So we were curious how all that was going to get handled. I think we saw specifically the power play in the early stages of the season struggled, which you kind of expect was going to be the case because you don't take one of the greatest power play performers in the history of the game out of your lineup and think that everything is going to be just fine right off the bat. And the fact that they lost some practice time, they lost some preseason games because of the hurricanes that hit our area and everything else. So it was a work in progress. Feels like they're getting more comfortable with it. And, I think I saw they were 30% since November 1st. So you're kind of seeing it perform at a level we're used to seeing, even without Stammer there. So that's the one thing. And one of the biggest things that we had discussed going into the regular season and some of the changes that they made, obviously the trade of Mikhail Sergachev as well, was they wanted to improve their 5-on-5 numbers. And here we are 25 games into the regular season, and I don't have them updated in my head from last night, but I think I saw the stat that last year at this time they were minus 20 goal differential 5-on-5. This year they're around plus 15, plus 17. So that's a 30 goal turnaround in 5-on-5 play. So that's the biggest area that they wanted to improve on. They didn't want to have to rely on their power play to rescue them games, even though it did that on Sunday in Vancouver. But they didn't want to do that. So that's the big thing we look for. Were they going to improve in that area? And the numbers certainly tell you it's been a massive improvement through the same part of the season this year compared to last year. So still a long way to go. It's been a roller coaster. They've had ups and downs. I think the whole league outside of the Winnipeg Jets have been a roller coaster this year. So I don't think it's any different for Tampa Bay. They're right in there with everybody else in the league. So, Brandon Hagel's taken a step forward. Anthony Cirelli has added some offense to his game that, we haven't seen him put up these kind of early season offensive numbers throughout his entire career at any point. So you can see he's added that to his game. Connor Geeky's probably the biggest surprise for me. I wasn't sure he would make it out of training camp, not because he doesn't have the talent.
You came to the Thunderbolts picnic. Yeah. You were able to stop in for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the off-season picnic, and that was one of the persons I had asked you about. Yeah. And you were like, I don't think he makes opening night roster, but I think he's going to get a little time in Syracuse, and then he will be with this team. And then what was it, like a week later, all of a sudden they announce opening night, and I see him on there, and I was like, oh, good. So I was wondering if that, because I know you had said you didn't think you'd make opening night, but the end of that he would definitely be part of this team. And so I'm happy to see you say, that is a surprise coming into the season.
Yeah. And, just to kind of qualify that a little bit, I wouldn't have been surprised based on the way he played in training camp, because he played well. And in the preseason games, he played well. And he, on merit, certainly he earned the opportunity. But just based on the historical situation with this team, since Steve Yzerman took over, and it's, been into Julian Breezeball and John Cooper and everything else, Braden Point's the only player as a 20-year-old that made the jump from junior to the NHL. So that tells you what they think of developing their young players, their prospects. I mean, Jonathan Drouin was a different situation. Mikhail Sergachev was a different situation. They both made it as 19-year-olds, where they either had to go back to junior, where they really weren't going to develop anymore at that level, or the NHL. Whereas Geeky had AHL eligibility. He could have went just like Braden Point did his rookie year, but they kept him. And so he's been the surprise in terms of just the fact that he started the season, and he's continued to grow his game. You've seen him grow in confidence. And that's one thing you notice about him right off the bat. He does not lack confidence and belief in himself. He definitely has that swagger to his game, and that certainly probably stands out to John Cooper. How many times we heard John Cooper use the word swag in his tenure here with Tampa Bay. So JJ Moser, didn't really know a lot about JJ. Only seen him a couple of times a year when he was out playing for Arizona. He's come in and really filled a lot of the minutes that Sergachev would have filled. Different role, because he's playing on the right side with Victor Hedman. So he's been a surprise. Jay Gensel, I think, has performed as you would expect him to perform. Everything that he's brought, he's come as advertised as a, sort of a subtle star in this league, having, ridden shotgun with Sidney Crosby for so many years. And, I think you're seeing how players like him can mesh so well with high elite players like Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point. It's been a seamless transition. The only thing that maybe you want to see is some more consistency to their game. I think Andrei Vasilevsky has had a little bit of a roller coaster at times. He seems to be uncharacteristically streaky, where he's had a stretch of really good games, and then a couple you're like, Where did that come from? So you want to see him kind of get back to a more consistent level in net and give this team a chance to win. And he does. I mean, the game last night in Edmonton, I mean, if you're going to give up 4 breakaways to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and only give up a goal really on one of them because the game-winning goal was actually he kicked it away and put it off of Victor Hedman's skate. So he was locked in last night in that game. So he's had certainly more of those moments, I think, of late than he did in the early part of the season. So, they're right there in the mix. Maybe you'd like to see a few more points in the bank at this point. I think they've left some points on the table this year in a few games. You hope that doesn't come back to haunt them. But if you look at the entire Eastern Conference, nobody is stepping forward. Rangers had a great start. They've come back to earth. Carolina's had stretches where they haven't been good. I mean, Washington's got the best record in the East. I don't think anybody would have predicted that. Even New Jersey has been up and down with, the coaching change to Sheldon Keefe and the team that they expect to have. So, the Lightning are right there in the mix. Find some consistency to their game. They're going to get most of these West Coast games out of the way by the first weekend of January. That's good. They'll stay more on the Eastern time zone for a good portion of the second half of the season. And take your chances. I like the way they're trending in the way that they're playing.
So not only does Erik have the Lightning insider, you guys might also know his voice if you listen to the radio portion of the broadcast. He's always during intermission reports. He's always usually after the game reporting. And then Shooter and I, in our experience in the press box, we get to see him at work when he's down there in the locker room. And let me tell you, Erik holds court down there. It is Erik and Benjamin and Gabby and Jay Retcher are the big four that are the bosses down there in that locker room. But let me tell you, almost every question asked that is not for TV from Gabby comes from Erik Erlendsson. So almost every soundbite, whether or not it's Cooper, whether or not it's in that locker room, that's from Erik. So, and it's great seeing you at work doing that stuff. Even when I was up there by myself and Shooter wasn't up there, I see you get ready to go downstairs and you're like, oh, I'm doing work for AP, constantly working this with this team. You're always, doing something involved with this team. So, put the name to the face and to the voice. And his website is really good. There is a question. So some of us that I see on here today, like Karen Clement, we went to Nashville for the game there on Black Friday. Of course, Vasi didn't travel with the team. They called up Tompkins. He was the backup. Then the next night we see Vasi and Ned against Toronto, and I'm listening to you on the after show on my drive home from Nashville. And you say that you felt like that was penciled in as a lost game. So my question is, then why would they have Vasi start that game and not do the Nashville game when that was pretty much a win game, and not have Vasi travel? And why would they put that on Vasi if it was considered, not that the team wants to lose it? It would be, when we say a lost game, usually it's, if we lose this game, it's okay that we know we're not going to win them all. But why would we put Vasi in that and not do the night before in Nashville?
Yeah, so I've used the phrase a lot, scheduled loss, right?
Yep.
And to kind of quantify that again, that was Tampa Bay's 5th game in 8 days. It's a lot of hockey. And that's why in a lot of ways it was kind of set up that way, because Toronto had played Florida on Wednesday. They didn't play Thursday. Obviously, nobody played on Thanksgiving, and they were one of the few teams that didn't play on Friday. Meanwhile, the Lightning had to get on a plane, travel to Nashville on Thursday night, play an afternoon game, come back. So that's what I mean by scheduled loss. There were a lot of circumstances that were up against Tampa Bay leading into that game. So that's why I kind of looked at it a little bit as a scheduled loss, just based on those circumstances. So as far as how coaches decide which goalie is going to get which game when you're going to split up the back-to-backs, And I would have to think that this was the plan all along. This wasn't something that they just suddenly decided. But the two schools of thought with deciding who's going to be in goal are twofold. You have the one that says, well, I want my starter against the perceived easier game, against maybe a little bit of a lesser opponent, because I want my better goalie to help us get the 2 points we think we should get against this team. Or in this case, they chose to give Vasilevsky not just the night off, but a complete night off. Don't even get on a plane. Don't even fly. Rest at home. And it's not physical rest. It's a mental rest. I mean, we know the leverage of high-level hockey that Andrei Vasilevsky has played throughout the past 7-8 years. I mean, you don't lead a team to 3 straight Stanley Cups without having some mental toughness to your game. So it was more of, you don't have to come to the rink. You don't have to put the pads on. That's the mental break. And, you guys have seen goalies put on pads before. You know how long that process can be. I mean, sometimes for morning skates, which is why you don't see him take as many morning skates as maybe as he did earlier in his career. Sometimes it takes them longer to put on and take off their gear than they're actually out on the ice. So some goalies like to have the feel. They want to feel the puck early. They want to feel the ice early. They want to get that under their feet. And some goalies don't need it, right? Marty Brodeur didn't need it, during his career. I mean, Marty Brodeur would sit in his locker stall and talk to the media for an hour after a morning skate. He was so gracious with his time, even on a game day. Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, I remember Marty Brodeur talking to us in the media at length at times. So goalies are different and they're treated differently. So I think in this case, they wanted Vazzy to go against Toronto because that's the division opponent. And we know that those points can be more valuable. And you saw in that one, if the Lightning had won that game in regulation, they'd have been tied with Toronto. They lose it, so they actually end up fall 4 points behind. So I think you put all that together. That's why you want to put Vazzy in that situation. And you might see this reverse at other points during the year. And right? You might see it where you put your backup, in this case, Jonas Johansson, in the second half of the game, and maybe he can steal it for you and give your number one guy the front half. And I mean, there's different thought processes that go into it.
And it also works as a little confidence boost for Johansson to play that game and get that win on the first half, because a lot of times your backup does get that second half where the team isn't as fresh. And
they get the tougher assignment.
Right. And we've seen where Johansson had been getting lit up there for a little bit and not had the best defensive effort in front of him on those second half of games. So I think it's also a little confidence thing for him to get the first game of that, have everybody fresh. It was a great game there in Nashville, and squeak out the win there in overtime and then come back the next day and play.
Yep. So, it's never the same process and how coaches decide who's going to start who. And I think, knowing Franz John and this coaching staff and the way they work, they probably have a good portion of the season mapped out. I don't know how deep they go into it, but this one was probably mapped out before the season even started. Let's take this opportunity here, because that's not the first time they left Andrei Vasilevsky at home when they've been on the road trip. They did it a couple of times previous, so it's not they've got precedent for doing it, and it might be different the next time. So there's a lot of circumstances that go into their thought process and who starts what's game. But that one, was always going to be a tough game, and that's why they wanted their number one to play that game is too, because they wanted the fresher version of Andrei Vasilevsky to face the Maple Leafs in that case, because those points were a little bit more important.
Well, whatever the idea was, it didn't work. And I wouldn't say Vasi looked bad. It was Toronto just had some perfect shots in that game, if I remember correctly. They had some really nice goals. Now, last night's game was pretty interesting, because it was kind of a boring game, and it just didn't seem like the offense could really get much going. I mean, the first line,
either team.
Yeah, I mean, we were giving away, like you mentioned earlier, some of these odd man rushes and just straight up breakaways. So the defense was kind of sleepwalking out there, but the Lightning were able to kind of stick in there till the end. And then, maybe had a goal at the end. You really couldn't see the puck go in the net. And at the end, it was just too little, too late. What do you make of these games where it seems like, we haven't really seen the offense sleepwalk too much like that, but I feel like some games you just see the defense is off. You think is that more of a coaching strategy on the other team, or we only play Edmonton 2 times a year, so maybe it's just unfamiliarity?
Well, I think with last night's game in particular, I mean, these two teams in the 2 meetings they met last year, they had 21 combined goals. You had a 6-4 final and you had a 7-4 final, right? And I think both coaches probably went into that game thinking we don't want to open it up. We better make sure we pay attention to details here and check tightly and don't give up a lot of space. Because, look, Nikita Kucherov was smothered through most of that game. Braden Point was smothered through most of that. Braden Point did not have a shot on goal, only had 1 shot attempt in the game. That tells you how close they were. I mean, there were times they were triple teaming Kucherov, right? They were not going to let Kucherov and Point burn them, right? So they really paid attention. And I think it shouldn't catch the Lightning by surprise, but I think it did a little bit because it was coming from Edmonton. Edmonton is not known for playing tight defense. They're just not, and look, they got to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final last year. And we know firsthand here how you have to kind of change your style a little bit to win in the playoffs. It led to a couple of cups here for sure. And maybe Edmonton is trying to figure that out here as they go forward, because their goals against have come down a little bit of late. They've tried to pay a little bit more closer attention. So I think that just kind of caught, in some ways, Tampa Bay off guard. And they didn't want to have to open up themselves either, because, I mean, look, as tight as the Lightning played last night, they still gave up 4 breakaways, because it doesn't take much of a breakdown for those guys to slip free. I mean, McDavid, we know he doesn't need much space at all to generate the speed that he has. I mean, the first, on the goal, I mean, he started back at his own blue line, and all of a sudden, bang, he's right past 3 Lightning players who were, I don't know, they were ready for it, but you can be ready for Connor McDavid, and he can still make you look like a fool, right? So I think both teams were really trying to play tight defense last night, not open it up, not expose themselves to clean look opportunities, even though the Lightning did give up the breakaways. So, and to me, look, it's only the second time this year the Lightning have been held to fewer than 2 goals in a game. So the offense, I mean, they're number 2 in the league in scoring, right? They're the only team in the league that's had 3 games this year where they've scored 8 goals. Some nights you get the breaks and it goes in for you, and they created enough. I think they created enough to have a chance to win that game last night. I think Stuart Skinner, surprise, surprise, came up with some stops that maybe you weren't expecting them to. And, I remember being on the broadcast with Chief and Greg last night. Jake Gensel's goal went through Stuart Skinner. He's prone to doing that. He is not an elite level goaltender. So if you get the chances on him, there's a good chance you're going to find one to squeeze through him. They did, but I tell you what, he didn't bite on Nikita Kucherov's breakaway. Kucherov tried his move. Didn't work. He kept that ice sealed. He didn't allow that to happen. I don't know if he saw it coming, expected it or whatnot, but he kept it sealed, so he was ready for that. He had a couple of stops on Nick Paul in close, so he came up with some stops that could have made a difference in the game, and sometimes it just doesn't go your way. The unfortunate part is that here we are again talking about another road game where the Lightning probably left at least a point on the table, because they could have gotten that game to overtime and gotten something out of it. They didn't. And I put the stat up in the story today. Last year, they were 11-3-8 in 1-goal games. Last night was already their 4th this season. So they've lost 4 1-goal games this year, where in the past couple of years, they've really excelled in the situation. So you just hope that these points that they're leaving out on the table, that we feel that they've left out on the table, don't make a difference in what looks like a pretty tightly compacted Eastern Conference right now.
And I feel like every single time the Lightning figure their identity out, someone gets injured. Someone that's important. I mean, you had Cooch, you had Paul, Sorelli, who has been, I think, the surprise of the season right now, as in veterans on this team. We're losing them. Yeah, they come back, but just when you start to see, I mean, look at all the fanfare for Cirelli getting named to Team Canada, which I don't think anybody would have guessed him to be part of Team Canada 3 weeks ago. So, you know, and Cooch, when they were just lighting it up, and Paul, he was finally getting on the scoring sheet. Then he goes off, comes back, scores his first game back. So it just seems like this injury bug, and we saw this several years ago back when Tyler Johnson, Nikita Kucherov, you were seeing all those injuries back then too. And you kind of hope the injury bug just gets us now, you know, rather than later on the end of the season. But I was just saying to Shooter right before we went live, the injury bug is really going around this year. There's so many different teams with high profile injuries or just injuries. I mean, you see Tyler Seguin's out. You have Ovi, who just had surgery and is coming back over to the U.S. Seguin just got back to Dallas after his surgery. So Austin Matthews, you know, he just made his return right before he came here. It's just this year it seems even more, and and I don't know if it's just big hits. You saw a hit on Hughes last night up in New Jersey. That was a questionable hit, but you have seen very little fines and suspensions this year. So is it just the injury going more than normal? It seems like this early in the season.
It feels like it's a little abnormal. You know, because, and probably maybe that perception is there because it is some high profile names, right? Like, I mean, Ryan Reeves hit Matthew Nyes, right? He got suspended for taking out Matthew Nyes. So that was a 5-game suspension that he got. But, you know, you look at these injuries though, they're not, and I can't think of any off the top of my head that are related to like bad hits, right? That are knocking guys out with hits. I mean, just here, just in Tampa Bay's case, I mean, we believe Pointer's was a muscle issue. Kucherov's looked like a muscle issue. Mitchell Chafee's looked like a hip or something. Maybe that came from a hit. You know, I went back and found the hit that Erik Chernak took when he raised himself up into the boards, and it looked like his arm absorbed the hit. It wasn't a bad hit. It wasn't a dirty hit, you know, but it looked like that. I mean, the hit on Cirelli by Juleson, bad spot on the boards, right? If that's up against the glass, it's probably nothing, but because it's right in front of the bench and he kind of bends him back a little bit, you know, so you can see the result of that. Austin Matthews was, I don't know if it was ever truly revealed, but I think it was a muscular type of situation or, you know, muscle situation. So like, I don't get the sense that these are from bad hits. I think some of the hits that are clean hits, what's the motto? Bigger, faster, stronger. Right? These guys, it's a 12-month out of the year they're working out. Like even in season, they're working out. They're building up. What's everybody say about 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds in the league? He's got to get stronger. He's got to get stronger. You know, I mean, look at a guy like Tom Wilson, right? Like he's gone from a player who would deliver a lot of those questionable hits to a valuable piece of a Washington team. You don't hear about Tom Wilson get in trouble now, but he's still a big, strong guy. So when he hits you, you're going to feel it, even when it's a legal hit. So I think part of it is just that. Every team goes through it at some point. It's very rare. You know, I think back to that 04 team that won the Cup. They didn't miss many games due to injury that year, and that was something that blessed them. But guess what? They did in the postseason. Jason Cullimore missed most of the postseason. Right, he was hurt in early stages of round 1 against the Islanders. Didn't come back until Game 7 against the Flyers in the Eastern Conference Final. So I think it just feels like it's more this year. I think because of the names that we're seeing that are missing time because of injury. Like, not to knock anybody down, but if, you know, a 4th-line guy in San Jose is injured for a week, you might not hear about it. But if it's Macklin Celebrini, well, hey, you hear about it, right? Because he missed some time this year as well. So, and again, an 18-year-old that needs to get stronger and more physical and everything else you want to throw at him. So I don't think there's anything necessarily due to any increase in bad or dirty hits, and that's probably why there hasn't been any suspensions, because, like even the hit in Jersey last night, maybe the only thing you could have said it was charging, but I don't know how far away he came from, and I forget who delivered the hit on him. But it was from the front. There was no head contact. Hughes put his head down to try and find the puck because it was at his feet, and he got hit. I mean, I didn't see anything wrong with that hit, but it's delivered on a star player, so it gets attention. If that hit is delivered on, Matthias Jarnkrok, we're not talking as much about it, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's more star players this year are missing time, so I think it gets your attention. And then I feel like we've had more bolts in and out of the lineup. You've had missed time, you've had point missed time. I mean, who on the roster has not missed time at this point? There's been very few that have played in every game. So I think that seeing, checking Eric's tweets on who's in the lineup has become super valuable, because you never know. You got Sorelli Chernak out now, and you got Paul and Cooch and Chafee back. So it's just tough to keep track of. And really, besides some, major injuries that Lightning stars have had in the past, the Lightning have been pretty lucky in recent years, to not have those major injuries. Sergachev was pretty bad last year, but and Stamkos has had a couple, but
Vassey's
Vassey last year. But yeah, with all these players in and out of the lineup, it's just kind of like, man, when are these guys gonna get healthy?
And these are the injuries we know about.
Yeah,
right. Like there's a lot that players deal with. We don't. I mean, think about it. Just think about Luke Glendening, the last game, right? It's an 8-1 game. He blocks a shot. He needs help getting off the ice. He hobbles his way down the locker room. Came back into the game because that's what hockey players do. But he felt that the next day. He's dealing with a bump. Like guys are dealing with bumps and bruises all the time. So really when hockey players miss time, it's because there's something that either is going to get worse if they play on it, or it's just too much. They have to take a break.
And how about Gage Gonsalves? Is he not like a surprise and the beneficiary of these injuries? Because he came up, went back down, and now they've been dropping like flies, and he gets to stay. And is this season the most I think I've ever seen Coop do the extra defenseman for so many games?
Yeah,
we're so early in the season. Do you think there comes to a point where he's going to just table that for a little while and just let these forwards go and start shooting?
Well, you know what? The fact that Gonsalves was still in the lineup Sunday in Vancouver when they were healthy, right? Like they had everybody available to them for that game, and Gonsalves stayed in the lineup. So I think that kind of tells you where his confidence level is in his game, but also what the coaches have in his game. He hasn't been a liability. And when you look for younger players, are you hurting this team defensively? Are you hurting this team because you're not winning puck battles? That's what coaches are going to look for when they evaluate playing time and who deserves to stay in the lineup. So the fact that Gonsalves was in the lineup on Sunday tells you where things are kind of trending with him when everybody was healthy, because that was the first game this year you can sit here and say everybody on the roster was available. And let's not forget too, Gonsalves was hurt at the end of training camp. Mm-hmm. Right. Like he missed some time in Syracuse to start the season. So, going back to the Connor Geekie situation, if he's healthy, is he here and Geekie went back? Like, I don't know. Like both of them were deserving, and Gonsalves was the guy who had to go through waivers. He's been a pleasant surprise. He's only got the one assist, but he's been involved. He's made some plays. I think you're going to see his game grow a little bit offensively because he has some offensive skill. Sometimes it doesn't translate right away from the AHL up here to the NHL for some younger players. So, but we'll see. I think it's going to get there. But hopefully they get healthy. I think they're still a better team, 12-6, than they are 11-7, even though they had success playing 11-7. But what you saw with the 11-7, I mean, how many games did they finish with 10 forwards because somebody was lost in game? Even going back to that Nashville game where Sorelli took the puck off the face in the opening period, and missed most of the second before, or missed the entire rest of the first period before he came back. You lose Cooch at the end of the first period, doesn't play the entire second period. So it's putting some extra minutes on guys that they don't necessarily are ready to play. Like it was a game, it was a home game, and then forgive me for which it was. Brandon Hagel had 28 minutes of ice time. That's a lot for a forward. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot for a defenseman, but you see defensemen do it all the time. But Hagel had to go get IVs after the game because he played 28 minutes. And I think that might have been that Saturday game against Toronto, because the night before he played like 24 minutes. I know it was on the second half of a back-to-back. So the guy played almost 60 full minutes of hockey in back-to-back nights. I mean, that's a lot. So 11-7 has its benefits, and certainly the Lightning have utilized that to their advantage. It gets Kucherov out there for a few extra shifts. It gets Gensel out there for a few extra shifts per game. But I think right now they're probably better suited 12-6 just because they can't seem to get through a game without losing somebody.
Yeah. I want to remind everyone, in your comments, make sure you add #insider. We got our giveaway tool here. So we're going to give away a subscription to lightninginsider.com. So put your comments in there and add #insider to those comments to enter. And if you go check out our Twitter, pinned to the very top of at We the Thunder Pod is a tweet, an X, whatever they call it, that we just put out. And if you want to win tickets to next Tuesday night's game, got a really good chance. And the instructions are in there on how to do that. Very simple. You have to hit 2 buttons. So go check that out if you want to go to the game on Tuesday night. Schooley and I will be hobnobbing again, rubbing elbows with the press.
Thanks for the warning. I appreciate it.
Yes.
And you were right. It was Toronto, 28-45 for him versus Toronto. The night before in Nashville, he played 22-53. So between the two games, he did 50 minutes, 51 minutes between the two games.
On back-to-back days.
Yeah. So, yeah, what it was that. What do you think about these four nations? We talked about this last week on our show. I think it isn't. I don't like the format because I think you have to include some kind of Russian, Finland, or Czechoslovakian, those kind of teams too. I think that you leave some of the greatest players off the ice for this tournament. And so what do you feel about it? And what do you feel about some of these snubs, like they're saying, like a Tage Thompson who didn't get in? And there's, you can make a point for a lot of players that got in, but then who do you really take out? What do you think about those four nations?
Well, with Russia, just remember, because they're still under sanctions from the IOC and the IIHF, that the NHL is going to follow along with that. So they probably would have been one of the four nations if they didn't have that situation. I see Matthew says include 8 nations. I mean, the World Cup of Hockey tried to do that, right? But like, you don't have enough players from Slovenia. Germany can put a couple of really good NHL players on the ice, but where do they stack up against the rest? And that's why you had a Team Europe and a Team North America, right? So, and then that was the 8 teams. And in this situation, though, if you expanded it to 8, it would be a longer stretch. Like, it's already almost 2 weeks off for this, and they're only playing 1 to 5 days, right? Because you got a couple of double headers that are built in here, and it's just round robin. There's no semifinals. It's just round robin and then straight to the finals. So, and the other part of it is you don't want to tax the top players in the league, because let's face it, it's the McDavids, the Kucherovs, the Austin Matthews. It's the top players in the league. They're going to be part of these processes and puts more miles on their body, so to speak. So in that aspect, it's something. Look, it's nice. This is the first time we can talk about best on best since 2014. I guess 2016 when they had the World Cup of Hockey. But again, like, that wasn't all of Canada. Connor McDavid was not on Team Canada, right? Austin Matthews was not on Team USA. They were on Team North America.
But can you say best on best when you don't have Shishkirkin, Vasia, Kucherov?
You can because it's the best of Team USA. It's the best of Team Canada. It's the best of Team Sweden. It's the best of Team Finland. So in that aspect, it is a best players on best players for their country. Yes, there are extremely talented Russian players that would make this a much more fun tournament, I think. But situations don't allow for it. But yeah, so it is still a best on best in my mind. We'll start with the Lightning players. Obviously, Point and Hedman were named as the original 6 for their respective teams in Sweden and Canada. And, people were probably surprised by Point being named to that team right away. But, that tells you what the rest of the league thinks of Braden Point and how good of a player he is and what kind of a difference he can make. Jake Gensel, no surprise on Team USA. They're going to need somebody, to play 5-on-5 who can defend, who can score some really clutch goals. He's had a knack for that in his career. So not a surprise to see him there. Sorelli, if anybody read Lightning Insider a couple weeks ago, you saw the story I wrote on him and how he was clearly on the radar for Team Canada and how he came back to town earlier than normal, back to Tampa earlier than normal in the offseason because he specifically wanted to spend a little bit more time around Nikita Kucherov, who's become, well known for these summer workouts that he continues to do and the work that he puts in to perfect his game when he gets into the season. So he wanted to kind of be around that and learn from it and pick the brain of one of the greatest offensive players, certainly in the game today. So you're seeing that element pay off for him. So he's added that offense to his game. And, the comment that John Cooper gave me when I asked him about Sorelli maybe potentially being somebody, talked about you can't just take the top 12 goal scorers from Canada and put them on a team. It doesn't work that way. You go back to Herb Brooks putting together the 1980 Olympic team. I'm not looking for the best players. I'm looking for the best team. And that's kind of the philosophy that you see a lot of these national coaches have in these situations because you've only got 2 power play units. You've only got, there's only 1 puck. So you have to work to be able to work together, but you need somebody who can close out a game, be out there in a 5-on-6 situation. We know Anthony Sorelli's a closer. He's done it in the Stanley Cup final. So you see the thought process. I think Hagel was probably the surprise. Not necessarily that he can't play with Team Canada, but, he's not a name that's going to stand out amongst the Makars and the McKinnons and, the McDavids and all those players that Team Canada can put out there. But he is a 30-goal scorer. And him and Sorelli, the chemistry they have, they're going to be the top PK unit going out there to kill off a Team USA power play or a Team Sweden power play. Those are the first 2 guys that are going to head over the boards to make that happen. So even national teams need players to take on roles. And so we'll talk about Team USA. You mentioned Tage Thompson not being on there. How is Jason Robertson not on this team? Jason Robertson is a terrific player. And, he's on that top line in Dallas. And that was the one you want to talk about because it's always easier in these situations to talk about who didn't make the team as opposed to who did. And that's just the nature of it. That's the way the conversation goes in these situations. You hear it every year at the All-Star game. Well, how did this guy not get in? How is this guy over this guy? All those conversations, but Robertson was the one guy that I looked at and say, how is he not on this team? Because they took a Brock Nelson, right? But again, Brock Nelson is a guy who can kill some penalties and he can score you some goals, and he's been a pretty good performer, different circumstances at the World Championships because yes, there's NHL players there, but it's not a best on best situation. But he's been a pretty good player for them. He's got leadership that he's brought to those teams. So he has experience in these settings. So, you talk about trying to build that team, so that's when you kind of break that down, you look at it and say, okay, this is why they selected a guy like Brock Nelson. So look, there's whoever doesn't win this 4 Nations is going to have questions about why they built the team this way. But don't think that John Cooper might not be under the most pressure because he's bringing 3 of his forwards to Team Canada. We know how deep Canada's pool is. He's got some pressure on him for his guys to perform at this level because he's probably going to coach the Olympic team again. a little over a year from now when they're in Italy. So it should be fun. I love the fact that it's not like every day like we see at the Olympics, that it is, but it's going to start on a Thursday and then a Friday and then Sunday, Tuesday. So it's going to be like every other day. So, we have some time to catch our breath a little bit from the season as well, in what should be a pretty fun tournament to kind of watch and see how it all plays out. And, somebody's going to have some bragging rights in February.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Now, as the Lightning insider, which team's going to win? What country do you think is going to take this?
U.S. is best on paper by far, right? You look just at their goaltending trio alone, with Ottinger and Hellebuck and Swayman. I mean, those are, look, we're not even talking about Thatcher Demko, and I know he's coming back from injury, but Thatcher Demko is going to be in this conversation for the Olympics next year. I mean, USA they're stacked. They're absolutely stacked in goal. I think they have, one of the better D-cores in the league. And I think from top to bottom, they probably have the best forward group. And so on paper, USA is the best team. This is the best team that I think certainly the best talent pool that the U.S. has ever had. And that's a big, nod to the U.S. development program that has kind of helped produce a lot of these players that have made their way to the NHL. I mean, Cole Caulfield's not on this team, right? And look at the start he's gotten off to and how hot of a player he's been. And, I think the U.S. has got, if I were to put money down, and I don't gamble, I don't put money down, but if I were, my money would be on Team USA.
Good call.
So everybody go put your money down on E.
I take no responsibility.
When Finland wins, you come back here when we have Erik on. And
you put your rent money down on USA. He said so.
All right. But if you win some money, buy a subscription to the site.
And we're giving one out, so make sure you add your comment #insider, and we'll do that probably here in the next 10 minutes. So make sure you get that in your comments. If you guys have any questions, go ahead, add them in there now too. I do want to go back to Cirelli. I know we talked quite a bit about him tonight. Do you think he's a product of just get more ice time this season?
Nope.
Success?
Nope. I think it's coming back early and working with Nikita Kucherov. I mean, the defense, you can teach players to play good defense. And Anthony Cirelli came into this league knowing how to play good defense. He's a shutdown guy. That's kind of been his role. I think he understood with the departure of Steven Stamkos. And I know you bring in Gensel, and, the production's probably going to be somewhat similar from what we would have seen from Stammer compared to what Gensel's probably going to end up with the end of the year. So that's going to be a wash in terms of that production. But I think he understood the void that was going to be left behind with Steven Stamkos. And I think that's why he came back early, because he wanted to add some of these elements to his game. He worked with Jeff Blashill. Like, he's come in and he's worked with Blash on trying to, get his shot off faster, get his shot more accurate. If you look at some of the goals he scored this year, we're used to seeing Cirelli, his goals come from the blue paint almost exclusively. Like, he's always around there. Even on breakaways, right? He would basically have to stick handle and hope he could push it past the goaltender when he'd get to the blue paint. Like, that's just his mentality. That's who he is, because his mind, and I had this conversation with him, his mind is always racing at 1,000 miles per hour. And he's learned to slow that down a little bit this year, because that's just the way he plays. That's why we love him, because he is relentless in his pursuit of the puck and his forecheck. But I think he's learned to slow the game down in his mind a little bit to find some of the areas. I mean, look at where he's scoring the goals from. Yes, he's around the net, but he's dropped back. He's closer to the hash marks on a more consistent basis, and he's scoring goals from those areas. So he's not in the paint just getting a tip or just picking up the loose garbage. He's firing the pucks into the net now. And I think that's the big difference in why the offense has jumped up for him this year. He's got tremendous chemistry with Brandon Hagel, and those two just continue to work so well together. I think that's been a big part of it too. But I think the biggest key for him for his turnaround this year is the understanding to make himself a more well-rounded player. I think hitting the 20-goal mark for himself last year, I think that meant something to him. And I think he wants to expand on that. So, the injuries, like he's missed some time here. I know that the other day was his first game he missed last night, but he's missed time in games with certain things. So, he's kind of fighting through whatever things that have kind of come his way. So whatever his pace on to finish on it with points, it's going to be a career high. I think he's going to smash that 20 goal mark this year, but I think it's all because of the dedication he put into the offseason to make himself more of an offensive threat rather than a guy that would hope to score 20 goals. I think he now has a confidence and a belief in himself that he will score 20 goals.
Yeah, and it's really taken him to the next level, because I think a lot of people, myself included, would have said last year, he's 20 goals, he's still third line center. But this year, he's had that opportunity to take over as the number 2 center, and he sees the opportunity. And yeah, there's a lot of things that have gone his way into doing that. His chemistry with Hagel's clear when they're out there on the ice. But yeah, the extra work that he's put in has definitely paid off.
And last season and the beginning and this offseason, it was rumored that he was on the trade block. Mm-hmm. So, and it was a big voice in everything that was being written, was that, Cirelli was available for these teams. And talking about those trade things, there's a whole bunch of smoke coming out of New York that Keiko is being shopped to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Is there anything you hear on this, or is that just, right now the Rangers their fan base is blowing up? We've seen that here in Tampa, but they get rid of Trouba, they ship him over, which God help anybody that faces the Ducks against that line of Trouba and Gudas. So
fortunately they're both right-hand shots.
Yeah. But they're a mess right there in New York, but all the rumors coming out of there is that we're in talks with trading him for 3 picks for next season. And what are you hearing?
Well, I always take these things with a grain of salt. And I know Darren Dreger was the one reporting that Kakko was available. And I don't know who tried to connect the dots to Tampa Bay. But if you ever had one of those connect the dot books when you were a kid, something's not connecting here, because the Lightning can't afford to just trade a player for draft picks.
Yep.
That's making, what's his hit, $2.9 million, I think is his hit this year. So you have to send dollars out if you even want to consider something like this. And the other part of it is he's a restricted free agent at the end of the year. So he's going to get a significant raise, even if it's the same. He's required to get, I think it's a 10% increase on his salary at a minimum just to qualify him. And it's not going to be 10%. It's going to be higher. And we know the cap issues that the Lightning have. Like, they're going to be a cap team again next year. I mean, the fact that they even have cap space under the cap this year without having to go into LTI is a testament to kind of how they've structured some of these deals. And, that's where the Mikhail Sergachev trade comes into factor, because you can get Moser and Geekie for less than, probably about $4 million less than what Sergachev is making. So you see, from a financial standpoint and a cap standpoint, you got 2 players for one, 2 productive players, for one, and brought your cap hit way down. So Kakko is going to go. I don't know. I don't think he might have arbitration rights. I don't know that off the top of my head, but if he has arbitration rights, the price goes up even higher on his next contract. So to me, those dots just do not connect. It doesn't mean the Lightning wouldn't have interest in bringing a player like him in. I mean, he's a young player, number 2 overall pick, hasn't developed like many thought he would. I mean, many thought he was the most NHL ready prospect coming out of that draft. And it just hasn't kind of come through for whatever reason. But again, if you're trying to connect those dots, I think if you're trying to make a Z and connect those dots, you're coming up with an S.
Yeah. And it just feels like it's every other day that there's a new New York Ranger on the block. So, you watch a lot of these hockey games, Eric. If you were the GM, what's the move that you would make at the trade deadline, saying it was this week for the Bolts? Do you go defense?
I think you probably go defense. They did it last year. I know they brought in Duclair, but they also brought in Matt Dumba. I still look at their bottom pairing, and Lilleberg's improved. Lilleberg has made huge strides, even just in season from game 1 to game 25. And he was terrific last night in the way that he played in Edmonton against a pretty intimidating lineup on the ice out there. So his game has come along, but the right side still scares me a little bit, right? I mean, look, Moser's playing the right. It's not his natural position. I think he's done a terrific job shifting over to his offside and playing with Victor Hedman. It's not an easy thing to do for anybody. But to me, I would still try and find a way to shore up my third pairing defense, right? And whether it's, Radish or Perbix are admirable. I think, the fact that Radish has kind of been the odd man out for a good portion of the season when they have been 12-6. I think Nick Perbix, his game has improved from last year. Last year, it just felt like every time he touched the puck, something disastrous was about to happen. I don't get that feel from him this year. I think he's calmed his game down back to where it was his rookie year. So he's come back to kind of the expectation level that we kind of think he should be at. So that's the first area that I would look at. And, after that, they've gotten some secondary scoring there. I see Matthew just kind of put it up there for third line. I don't know if Gonçalves finds his offensive game a little bit, now all of a sudden you've got some depth. I mean, if Mitchell Chaffee draws back down to the third line, if Connor Geekie can continue to round out his game and become a more consistent, player, the physical side is there. So the third line can come together. So we'll see where things sit on that front once we get to the Four Nations break in February, because that'll be about a month before the trade deadline, a couple weeks before the trade deadline. But if I had one area I would probably like to address, it'd probably be, like a lot of teams in the league, a right shot defenseman.
Yeah. Roscoe had another good question here. We didn't really touch too much on Mitchell Chaffee, but he started the season really, really great. He's been banged up. We saw him back in the lineup this week. What do you think of Chaffee? I believe he's on an undrafted gem that the Lightning somehow found, and he just seems to be getting better.
Yeah, big kid. Has the size already. Coming off a knee injury, he had a 2-year contract in Minnesota. So his last year he had the knee surgery that he wasn't quite over, even when he came to training camp last year for Tampa. But you saw as he got the knee strength came back, the confidence in the knee came back. You saw his game improve down in Syracuse. And then when he came here, the one thing that coaches will always look for young players, and Chaffee falls into this category big time. Okay, you've got some skill around the net. We see your shot that shows up on tape. What do you do in the corners? How are you in your board battles? Are you winning pucks? Can you go in there in a 50-50 and come out with a puck more often than not? And Chaffee does that. And he's not afraid to get to those middle areas of the ice. So he's taking some of that skill that he has, and I think he has pretty good hands around the net. He's got a good release, specifically on his wrist shot. When you put all that together, you can see why he continues to get the opportunities and the chances he has, because he just continues, like a lot of young players, grow in his confidence and take the direction from the coaching staff to make sure you're taking care of these areas to help your team. And then the other part will start to come and shine through that you're already pretty strong at. And a lot of players come into this league as good offensive players. They learn to play defense and learn to play without the puck, because you don't get the puck as much at the NHL level compared to where you ever were at any point in your career. You could have been the most dominant player in college. You're not going to have the puck as much. You could be the most dominant player in junior. You're not going to get the puck as much in the NHL. You just have to learn to adapt and your play without the puck. I mean, Marty St. Louis is a great example of how he learned to kind of become that type of a player once he finally reached the NHL. So I think they're pleased with the way Chaffee's come along. Again, you want to see more consistent offense. It was there before he got hurt and missed a couple of games. So you want to kind of see him get back to that, be more of a consistent offensive threat to give some of that depth scoring.
Yeah. And it's good to see these younger guys in the lineup, contributing. And to your point earlier, that bottom six, you feel a lot more comfortable with where they're at this year compared to last year, because we know to win a Stanley Cup, you really got to have all four lines kind of rolling.
Here's a good question by Stephanie. See a lot of people saying Hedman has slowed down and lost a step. In some games, he hasn't played his best. What are your thoughts on how Hedman has played this season?
I think with Hetty, I think as we see a lot of players do, when they get named a captain of a team, they take it to heart, maybe a little too much to heart. You don't want them to change who they are, but I think, Hetty's kind of taken on some of that captaincy responsibility, and it's kind of weighed on him just a little bit. I think he's still an elite skater in this league. If a guy like Victor Hedman loses a step, he's still in line with the rest of the league. It's just how good of a skater he is. The one area I'd like to see Victor clean up more consistently, and we saw this certainly at portions of last season as well, is his puck management. He's kind of put himself into positions now where you're saying, Victor, what are you doing with the puck? Well, what happened there? Why was that there? So those are the areas that I think he's kind of dropped a little bit in his game, and that's not a physical thing. That's a mental thing to me, and just reading the game a little bit better, more close to what we're used to. And look, the last couple of years, since Jan Ruda left, it's been a struggle to find somebody to play alongside Victor Hedman because he's not easy to play with. He's a different type of defenseman who will roam all over the ice where you're not used to your partner doing that. So Erik Erlendsson can't play with Victor Hedman because he just can't do it. He can't read the game the way Victor Hedman reads the game. His style is too different from Victor's. So when those two are together, they're not as good of a pair as you think they should be, considering how good Erik Erlendsson can be. So I think that's been part of it too. I think he feels he's had to do more. And last year, really the last 2 years without Ryan McDonough around, he has had to take on more responsibility as a number one penalty killer on the left side. Now he doesn't have to do that. So hopefully that kind of takes some of those minutes off of his game and allows him to get back to being a player that's more consistent, because the offense is still there. That part of his game is never going to go away. It's the other areas you just want to see him be more consistent to kind of get back to the guy he was before. And he can do it, and I think he will do it.
But you said his offense is still there, and we were lucky enough to be up in the press box where they 8-2 win against Colorado, and we brought up how Hedman had 0 shots, and then I listened to you on the Lightning replay the next day, and you talked about not only did he have no shots on goal, he only took 1 shot, and it didn't hit the thing. I've seen in that more often now is that he's not shooting. You talked about point not having. Is it more they're paying more attention to him, or is it him just trying to spread it around in his head?
Well, and it's not just him.
Yeah.
It's everybody. They get caught up in each other sometimes, and it's just, again, it's the makeup of hockey players where they're unselfish. So, John Cooper talked about this a couple of times this year, and the main comment you think back to was after the Philadelphia game where he said, we're making an uncomplicated game complicated because they're passing out of shooting opportunities. And sometimes it's the right play, right? Like McDonough feeding Kucherov in Vancouver. That was the right pass because I forget who the goalie was, moved over. He's over far in the crease, and Kucherov has a wide open net to look at. So the goalie's already here. That's the right play as long as that pass gets through. The problem is that too often they're getting caught up in trying to pass pucks through sticks. And it's easy for NHL players to just put a stick out and disrupt a pass. So while you might think that pass you're making is leading to a scoring chance, you've just taken it away to becoming a 0 scoring chance. Maybe your scoring chance shooting the puck, maybe it was a little bit of a lower percentage goal scoring opportunity, but the lower percentage was also trying to get that puck across. And I think Dave Mishkin said it best last night. Mikey Asimont did that. And when Mikey Asimont is getting caught up in that, I don't think I've ever seen that kid pass up too many shooting opportunities. He is not afraid to shoot the puck.
No.
And he passed out of one last night. And so guys just get caught up, and they just need reminders sometimes to stop overpassing. And it's okay to put pucks on net. I mean, Chief has told me the story a million times in his days with the Flyers. They had a rule on the power play: no more than 3 passes without a shot being taken. That's just it. Get a puck on net, because the famous saying, 100% of the shots you don't take, you don't score. It's a cliche, and it's kind of messes with your head, but it's 100% true. If you pass up too many shots, your opportunities to score go down. Now, it doesn't mean you're always shooting, because puck possession is a part of it. Getting set up and trying to set up plays, because the players in the game today are so creative and they're so good at what they do that they can make plays out of nothing. I mean, we see a wizard every night in 86 pulling some stuff out of his bag of tricks. So you're like, how in the world did he pull that off? So there are guys that are capable of making plays like that. But sometimes it's okay to just shoot the puck. Maybe there's a tip. Maybe the goalie doesn't see it. Maybe he doesn't read it right. Maybe there's a rebound. Like, there's a lot of things. It's sort of the thought process, to kind of give a football analogy. What do they say? There's 2 options when you're on offense. You can run the ball or you can pass the ball. When you run the ball, there's only one bad thing that can happen. You could fumble it. When you pass the ball, there's 2 bad things that can happen and 1 good thing, right? The 1 good thing is you complete the pass and you gain yardage, or you could throw an incomplete pass, or it gets intercepted. So that's kind of that thought process there. Sometimes a safer play is the smarter play that's going to lead to more offense if you execute it and you do it right. So I think Victor is as guilty as anybody else on this team of being in that triangle area, that home plate area that comes out from the net to the hash mark, sometimes even to the top of the circles, passing out of that, because Brian Engblom told me one time he blames Leon Draisaitl for this, because how many times have you seen Draisaitl score from the goal line? He's down at the bottom of the circle and hitting what look like are impossible angles, and now guys are trying to pass to those areas, because the guys practice this. They practice those high, top shelf, low percentage, small window shots, and they're good at it. It's almost like the 6-hole nowadays. But too many guys are trying to do that rather than taking what might be the higher percentage play. You might have more bodies to try and get the puck through, but it's still a good play rather than maybe passing it out to the side. So it's easy for us to say, because we sit back and we look at this game at a much different level, right? I always marvel at hockey players, because the game is so fast. They have to process all of everything we just talked about in the span of about 1 second, sometimes under a second. So it has to be instinctual. And sometimes their instinct is to pass the puck. Sometimes you just have to remind yourself to fight that instinct sometimes and just shoot it.
Just shoot it. And we've seen some cases this season where they did get shot happy. The Colorado game, I felt like they went out there shooting the puck that game, and 8 goals later.
And Colorado's gotten rid of both their goalies since we beat them.
We got a couple of Woods now, a Wedgwood and a Blackwood.
And then they have Wood also on their
Miles Wood, a lot of trees in Colorado.
And Ross Colton came back and scored another goal. So Ross Colton is back in the lineup, and he's on his way to maybe his best season so far. So good for him. And to go back to Hedman, I've said it a lot about Sergachev in the past, but like, being a defenseman is a tough job, right? Because what do we remember? We remember when you turn over the puck. We remember the bad play you make. And we don't remember like maybe the 5 really good defensive plays you make each game. So, it's one of those things when you're playing over 25 minutes a night, then we're going to remember those not so good plays. But I think Victor Hedman's still a very good player. Yeah. One more question for you, and last chance if you want to get in on the drawing, #insider, add that to your post or to your comment here. If you want to get in, we're going to do that after one last question here. We haven't really talked about this yet because I think it just came out last week, but we have our 2025 version of the Lightning Hall of Fame, which is going to be Brian Bradley and Rick Peckham. I think both very well deserved. But I want to ask the insider, who's next? Who's due? Who's got to get in next year?
Oh boy, I thought you were gonna hit me with easy questions. Yeah, that's a good question. I think you're going to start looking at, especially with Bradley getting in, where does Pavel Kubina fall into this, and the longevity and everything else that Kubi meant, and obviously a big part of that 2004 Stanley Cup team. Nikolai Habibulin, and the impact that he made. I know he was only here for a couple of seasons, but obviously the impact that he made in the short period of time that he was here, an elite goaltender who they traded for and helped lead them to a championship. Ben Bishop's name has kind of been knocked around here a little bit. Ryan Callahan's name has been knocked around. Boy, I hadn't given too much thought about what next year's class might look like, but I think
these
Kubi's
were the
name
ones
will be up
that
there.
were up for vote this year, that Peckham and Bradley. So it was Callahan, who you had mentioned, Bishop, who you mentioned, Hobby Bolin, who you mentioned, Kubina, Jay Feaster, Henry Paul, and then it was Rick Peckham and Brian Bradley. So I think Jay Feaster definitely, when you're talking, deserves to be in there. I think he's one of them that deserve to be in there too.
I think you're going to get a strong push at some point for Henry Paul. Phil obviously has talked a lot about the importance of Henry Paul to this franchise, even being here, and a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that a lot of fans probably don't know about in helping Phil secure. So I know Phil in some of these conversations that we've had is going to push hard for Henry Paul. Feaster will certainly be in there. John Tortorella at some point, his name will kind of be bantered about here. But I think if we're looking at the near term and what might be the 2026 class, I think some of the other names that were on that list are probably going to gain some more support. I would be surprised if Kubi is not on this list next year.
Yeah, and it was funny because when we were first talking about Henry Paul being on the initial list, we didn't really know who he was. We had to kind of look it up and figure out who Henry Paul was. And I think we did that on a show live. So yeah, he was instrumental in this franchise coming here to Tampa. So it's fun to kind of have this Hall of Fame now. It gives us another thing to kind of talk about, and it'll be fun to see these guys back. I know we've talked a lot about Happy Bolin getting in there, and I think eventually he does. But I swear the problem with him is how do they got to schedule him to come back, right?
Yeah. That does factor into this. Believe me, it does. So, hey, can I take these other two? I want to take two of these questions here that are over the side before we go off. Beverly's, how often does a skating coach work with the players during the season? Connor Geeky. I can tell you, Barb Underhill comes in at least twice a year to work with the players, and it's not just the young players. She'll come in and work with the other players too, and to know the impact that Barb has in hockey. Certainly, we've seen it firsthand here. Braden Point went from an average skater to an elite skater, working with Barb, working with her in the summers, and the improvements that she helped him get to. What's the other one? Sorelli, again, a decent skater when he came to the NHL. Thanks, Jay. But Sorelli's skating has improved significantly. But I think the poster boy is Carter Verhaeghe. Carter Verhaeghe, the one thing that slowed him down from getting to the NHL, his skating always held him back. They brought him in here and worked with him extensively because you can see the offensive side. And this organization feels they can work with just about anybody to improve their skating. When we got to the summer reboot camp in 2020, the COVID year, before everybody headed up to Toronto and Edmonton for the Stanley Cup playoffs, Carter Verhaeghe was one of the fastest players on the ice for Tampa Bay. So you can see the improvement. So, you see the 30 goals that he's scoring now, the clutch goals that he's scoring for the Florida Panthers now. Sorry, fans, I don't mean to make you cringe thinking about Carter Verhaeghe being down in Florida, but you see those improvements that she can help players get to. It doesn't work with everybody. It didn't work with Cal Foote. He just could not improve his foot speed No pun intended there. As much as they worked with him to try to get his skating to improve, they just couldn't get it to the level that they needed to get to. But there are players that they can get to improve significantly their skating abilities. So it's a great question, Beverly. Barb does come in and work with a lot of these players on a regular basis. It's a little too big for the wall, I think. I don't think my wife will let that one go up. Unless it's inscribed. Maybe we got to get it inscribed.
This is
someone I remember Bev skating with a lot was Coburn. And I used to find it so funny because he was so tall and she's a little lady. But she used to skate with him, and you see that a lot in the early days of the training camp, or when they rent the ice out themselves in the summer and it's unofficial camp with them guys. She's there a lot with them, working with them, and she really puts a lot of time into that. And they videotape it on the iPad, and then once they're done with what they're doing, they go right over the iPad and watch it, and she will correct it right there and work again with them, videotape it again. So it's definitely extensive with her, and I don't think she gets enough credit. You'll hear her occasionally mention, but she definitely is a huge factor in the speed on this team and the skating on this team, and also development of that, and also being able to, like you said, a cow foot, be like, he's not going to get to that we need him at, and being able to recognize that. So yeah, she doesn't get enough credit, but if you ever get a chance to go in the off season and go to Brandon and watch her, she's really good out there with the guys.
Just go to one of the development camps in the summer, because that's what those camps are for. There's not a lot of skill work that goes on in those camps. It's a lot of foundational work. And she works extensively with every player that's in camp, whether they're a first-round draft pick or a training camp invitee. She works with all of them to help them improve. And it's boring to watch, but you see the results when the players put the work in to get it done. And some players just adapt to it better. And because it's technique, right? It's how much are you digging into the ice. It's the little things that maybe we wouldn't think about as those kind of watching the game. And how they improve their skating, and then you just see about, the improvements that are made, and she's in such high demand. Like, she doesn't just work for the Lightning; she works for a couple of other teams too. And the only reason she does that is because she'd be too expensive for a team to hire her away to work exclusively with them because of all the other work that she does. Right. So that's why nobody has hired her, because she has all these other opportunities to continue to work with others. So it's not just the Lightning, but it is one of the few teams that she does more work. Yeah. And that's the other question I wanted to answer from Stephanie. I'll say this. Nobody has a hockey IQ like Nikita Kucherov. Nobody thinks the game like Nikita Kucherov. Nobody sees the game like Nikita Kucherov. What Jake Gensel's hockey IQ does is allow him to be at least on the level of knowing how he thinks, right? And sometimes that's just as important, knowing how a line mate thinks. And that's why it's so important in hockey for chemistry, for players to be able to work together and understand each other. And the fact that he can jump right in, again, having played with Sidney Crosby, but Sidney Crosby is a different player from Nikita Kucherov. The way he plays the game is so much different than Nikita Kucherov. Still great players, still elite offensive players. They just play the game differently. And so Jake Gensel's hockey IQ doesn't have to be at a level of Nikita Kucherov. He has a high enough level to understand how to play with Nikita Kucherov. And it doesn't take long for a player like him to adapt to the way that Kucherov can play, because one thing that I've even learned through the years is that when players come here, they start to study their new teammates, right? And established players coming in and learning about established players. They'll start to look at some tape. JJ Moser, once he found out he was going to play the right side, watch some tape of Victor Hedman. Okay, what's he doing here, to kind of get an understanding for how they play. And it's no different with Guentzel. I'm sure he looked at some tape of Nikita Kucherov to try and understand how he plays. So that way he's already got a framework in his mind to understand it. And then you get on the ice and you kind of put it all together. And that's why, while his hockey IQ is different than Nikita Kucherov's, and again, he's on a different plane than most everybody else in the league in the way that he thinks the game and sees the game. But Gensel fits right in because of what he does. And Beverly, the break in February, I haven't seen what the schedule looks like, but I'm going to guess that NHL players are not allowed to be practicing for a certain amount of time during that break. It's no different than during the Olympics. Like they'll go off. Yeah, they'll go off and they'll vacation and everything else. And then once the teams are allowed to bring everybody back in, it'll be a couple of days before the season restarts in that case. So players are free to do stuff on their own. If they want to go work with her, they could go work for her, work with her, but it's not required. The team can't require players to do that. And let's face it, at that point of the year, it's never a bad thing for players to kind of get away from the game for a couple of days.
We've seen in the past, this is going to be treated like an all-star break. And we've seen in the past them do team trips. I think a couple of years ago it was the Bahamas they had some plane issue the one time and stuff.
Think about the bye weeks when teams, there's not one this year, but when the teams have their bye weeks, so it's I think 8 days between games, the team is not permitted to do anything with the players for 5 of those days. They have to have 5 consecutive days off. So it'll be something similar to that with the Four Nations, but I haven't seen exactly what it is because it's a little bit of a longer break than what a traditional bye week would be.
We had a bye week, didn't we? But
it wasn't an official bye week. Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, that Gensel's IQ and matching Kucherov, a really good example of that pretty early in the season was that pass from behind the net where Kuch was going
in Colorado.
In Gensel just was where you're supposed to be with his stick on the ice and didn't miss a beat, was ready for that pass.
He Bergenheimed him.
Yeah. And that does really make a difference. And you see it all over this team with Hagel and Sorelli having that chemistry, McDonough and Chernak kind of returning together with their pairing. They complement each other. So that really helps. And not to knock a team while they're down, but like the paper champs, Nashville, with a really talented roster, can't win a game. Yeah, it's
crazy.
And
much talent there.
They had, it was sad. They had Stammer do a post-game interview last night. I was watching the end of their game and he did not hold back. They are not happy in that locker room.
Eric, when we went to Nashville, of course I'm in my Stamkos jersey. They were telling us to take him back with us. They do not like him down there. They don't like Marchessault. They don't like any. And I'm thinking, but when you go to Nashville, his banners everywhere on there, but and they were all for it. But I think the other side of this Four Nations thing, I think this team gets it together. I was reading a story today that, if Trotz was to start really trading this team, does that make him a failure in his first year? And Trotz isn't someone that really gives up too easily. So I really don't think he's going to, get rid of this team. But I think coming on the other side of this, I think you'll start seeing it because on paper, I mean, they should be in the Stanley Cup finals with the talent they have.
They're 13 points out of a playoff spot. You're not going to make up that time between now and February. It's interesting to watch because with some of those players, including Stamkos, like they have restrictions on trades and no move clauses and so there's only so much as a general manager you can do. Look, nobody when they sign these players, and Brady Shea is the other one that was kind of the big name that kind of came in over the summer with the way that Nashville was playing. Like what's crazy about all this? Yeah, they're having some problems scoring goals. There's no doubt. The 5-on-5 numbers that they're giving up are crazy. They got UC Saros in net. And they can't keep the puck out of their own net. That's the crazy part about all this is that they can't take care of their own end, which has never been Nashville's problem. It's never been their problem. So something's probably going to have to give. I think what the 8-game winless streak that they're on right now, it's those are tough. I've witnessed a few of those myself in the day, and it weighs on everybody around the organization. Because when you go on that kind of a skid, your season's pretty much over by that point. I mean, we're almost to Christmas now, and to be this far out, they kind of know where their season's at and how hard it's going to be to make up ground. I mean, St. Louis did it, but that's a different story. At least there's hope. St. Louis winning the cup in 19 gives them hope that you can climb out of the basement and get to the playoffs, because that's all you got to do is get in. But I think the Western Conference is so deep, it's going to be very difficult for Nashville to climb out of it. So if you can't move the players, it's the coach that's got it. Like you can't. It's easy to fire one coach than it is to trade 20 players, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see how Barry Trotz handles this, because I don't think anybody who saw these moves in the summer thought that we'd see Nashville sitting last in the Western Conference right now.
Yeah, it's shocking. And even Stamkos mentioned last night, I mean, they're still scoring. 3 goals last night, 3 goals the night before. But they got to keep them out of their net too. So, yep. All right, let's do this giveaway. We'll get Erik out of here. Stay tuned, though. We got another 10 minutes on us because we got to do a weekly challenge. Guess who was this close to winning the weekly challenge?
Who?
It was me. I somehow said Connor McDavid would not score against the Lightning. That was a stupid. It's like that one time I bet against Patrick Mahomes. Never make that mistake again. But yeah, we'll do it again. Will Williamson, I think that's who it was. Someone that follows us on Twitter. Will. I'll find your name. You were right there with me. We almost won it, but we both bet against David, which you shouldn't do. That guy's pretty good. And by the way, pretty impressive stats. They kept putting them up. How Cooch kind of and McDavid really the same exact stats. What they weren't missing, or what they were missing from that, was games played, because I think Cooch has played a couple more games than McDavid this season. All right, let me share my screen here and let's get this thing rolling for the winner. And no, we are not eligible because I put the hashtag in the comments. We'll be on there and we'll probably win.
We have a couple times.
Yeah.
Yep.
Winner.
Happens when we do that. That's how you know it's completely rigged.
Good thing it wasn't a puck giveaway. We know it would be rigged then.
Now we are going to give away some good stuff. Beverly B, there you go. She had some great questions out there on YouTube. Beverly, shoot us a message if you can. With your email address. So shoot us a DM. The easiest way to do that is on Twitter. So go find us on Twitter, We the Thunder Pod, or I think you can message us through YouTube. I'm not sure. But definitely get a hold of us, and we'll need your email to get that all set up. But we are glad we could do that. There you go. She's still there. Yay. We're glad we could do that. And by the way, if you're looking like I am for some last minute Christmas gifts, I know we got a couple weeks, but you can always probably gift someone the gift of lightninginsider.com, or hey, if you want to get someone some tickets to a Lightning game or any event, we got our sponsor right above Thomas's shoulder there, WTT Pod. Get yourself $10 off your first purchase there, and that helps us out too. Erik, will you come on later this season? Maybe we'll get you on trade deadline-ish and, speculate on some things that might or may not happen, or maybe right after. You down for that?
Absolutely. Of course.
This is what happens when it takes so long to get you on. I've been holding messages down. I've tried to stay off Twitter, so I didn't tweet you. I tried to, and I was like, no, I'm going to save this for the show. And there was the one where you had talked about, the loss thing. I was like, I want to know what he means by that when he says that on the radio. And I was like, I don't want to ask him until he's on the show, because I know, let's get real. I mean, 90% of the people that are true Lightning fans are sponsors. Get your subscription. They're diehards. Stephanie, 900 tweets between you and her.
One of my biggest supporters is Stephanie.
today you said twice about Jan Ruda, so Mike Douglas is going to be somewhere watching this naked, because you said, but, and Serena, and, there's so many of these, it's going to be those new fans. So if you guys know a new fan and someone new to the game, because yes, Erik puts out stuff all the time, but you can also always read the old stuff. And Erik has a lot of great stories out there. And you might not see his face, and this is why we like for him to do this show. You'll see him on Jay
Radio.
Yeah, we all do. Jay Retcher, he's doing a podcast now, and Erik comes on there and does his Lightning part on there. But you hear him every single game during the Lightning audio network. He's always there talking to Chief. He's always there talking with Greg Linnelli. He's doing interviews down in the locker room. So you definitely know his voice. And he gets a lot of respect from those players, a lot of respect from the coaches. So go on there and subscribe to him. Give somebody, like Shooter said, Christmas, give them the subscription. Even if you just don't want to pay the whole year, he's got other different options there. Give them it, let them try it out. If they like it, tell them they have to pay for the rest of the year.
Yeah, like we said when you first jumped on, covered this team for 175 years.
Sometimes you feel
nobody knows the team better. So it's honestly it's a treat for us every time you come on, and there is actually a little competition. You might not even know this, for who's been on this show the most as a guest, and it's you're neck and neck with Sonia. I don't know if you know that. Sonia are going back and forth.
I told you my Sonia story, right? I think I told you after the game last couple weeks ago. So I was at the Hall of Fame dinner last year, and Sonia and her husband were at the table that I was sitting at, and she's kind of looking at me, and she goes, "You look familiar to me." I was like, "Yeah, I follow you on Twitter. I'm Lighting Insider." She goes, No. Oh, you were on that We the Thunder podcast just the other day, because I think I had just come on the show last year in February. So she recognized me from being on your show and not from social media, even though I had interacted with her several times over the years with social media. So so you talk about putting a face with a voice. I think that helped right there.
That's
and that's the thing, is that you hear these people's voices all the time. And you're like, when people when Dave Mishkin walks by, and I'm like, "Oh, there's Mishkin," and they're like, "What?" They're like, "That's Dave Mishkin," and you're like, "Yes, that's the guy that screams every goal. Yes, that is him." Real quick about Sonia. Sonia I know she posted in Thunderbolts, and we've talked about her. She got some other bad news while she's been in South Carolina. She is going to come back, and she will be here for 5 games. And then headed back to South Carolina. So if for these 5 games you do see Sonia, please make sure you just let her know you're thinking of her and give her high hopes. It's not her mother. She hasn't put it out there yet, but I don't think she really cares. Her son, who had the heart transplant, his body rejected the heart transplant. So he is now in the hospital also. So in South Carolina. So she's spending time between her son and her mom right now. They're in 2 different hospitals about an hour away from each other. So she will be down for 5 games, and then she's going to be heading back to South Carolina for an extended period of time. So if you see her during these next 5 games, make sure you just let her know that you're behind her and you're with her, because that's what I told her. I said, there's 19,000 people here that are cheering for her, and if she needs anybody.
Absolutely. Well said, Thomas.
All right, well, let's get Erik out of here. Don't leave yet, folks. We'll do the challenge here. Erik, thank you again for jumping on. Unfortunately for you, we will see you on Tuesday night up there.
Real quick, I do want to ask you, are visiting teams still doing things for Columbus when they come in? Have you heard, are we going to do anything for Gaudreau? I know I've gotten the question several times, and you saw that more at the beginning of the season. By the way, Calgary did the best thing ever by making him the #1 star there in Calgary the night them two played each other. But have you heard, is the Lightning planning anything?
I have not heard specifically, but it would surprise me if they didn't do something about it, right? Obviously, they did it at the beginning of the year and had a moment of silence for Johnny and Matthew. But I would be surprised if there's not something that the team does to acknowledge Columbus coming in for the first time.
We didn't get to do something here, did we? Because we did it about the hurricane.
No, there was some other time where they had a moment of silence for the Gaudreau family.
Preseason.
Yeah, it might have been the first preseason game that was at home. But it would surprise me if they didn't in some way acknowledge Columbus's first trip in Amalie Arena this year, because obviously, Johnny had such an impact on the game. But, what you find out now, unfortunately, after he passes and his brother passes, on the kind of impact they had with their family, with the communities they grew up in, with the communities they lived in. I mean, that's the sad part about all this, is that we didn't maybe realize Johnny Gaudreau was a superstar on the ice, but he was even more of a superstar off the ice. And we probably didn't see enough of that side of him to fully understand the human being that he was, and to see his family react and embrace everything and soak all the love in, for two outstanding men. I'd be surprised if the Lightning don't acknowledge that at some point, because it's still going to have an impact forever. I mean, that the Gaudreau name is going to live on forever, certainly in hockey circles. So I'd be surprised if there's not some sort of acknowledgement from the team. That's just who the Lightning are.
Yeah,
right.
They'll do something pregame, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But hey, it's a good reminder how all this happened. Don't drink and drive. Do not drink and drive, especially it's December, holiday parties, holidays, Uber, Lyft. Listen, I like to have a couple drinks, but don't get behind the wheel. I mean, tragedies like that happen.
And don't bicycle. There's no reason to exercise. Don't do that.
I like that. It does scare me because people are drivers just without drinks. So
yeah, right. I mean, there's too much aggressive driving without it.
Yeah.
All right, Eric. We'll let you go. We'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks again, and we'll get you back after the new year. Thanks again.
Yep, sounds good. I appreciate the time, and Merry Christmas, everybody, and everybody in the chat that's watching. Thanks for viewing, and hope to see you around.
Merry Christmas to you, Eric.
Yep. All right. We've got some business to take care of. If you haven't been on We the Thunder Pod X yet, we are giving away tickets to that game versus Columbus next Tuesday. It is pinned to the top of the profile. To win those tickets, all you have to do is follow us and retweet that tweet. At some point on Monday afternoon, I will go live on X and I will do our random number generator on Google.
Will you have volume this time?
I might have volume, or you might just have to read my lips. We'll see. No, I'll try to not mess this one up. We did if you missed the, what was that last week? I did a drawing real quick for Karen Clemente, gave away her extra table for block party. And I went live to announce the winner for 5 minutes and do the drawing and had my microphone off or something not connected. Listen, I can only go live on Wednesday nights, okay? Between 7 and 9. It's the only time I know how to work this equipment. I do want to do some watch-alongs, though. I want to do them at Dignitary Cafe. Maybe we'll force Ian to come get on camera with us a little bit. But really, I just want to do it remotely. But they're still rebuilding, so another place to go support a local business. Go to Dignitary and go get yourself some kava and some other stuff that they sell there. You can go support them because they're rebuilding. The hurricane took them out. They had 2 feet of water in there. So I'm going to be there. I'm going to have a camera installed there so that hopefully once they get everything in order, I'll be able to go there and just turn that camera on and watch games. And you guys can come join me if you want to, or just watch along with me. So I might do some practice runs with that. Maybe tomorrow night. We got a 9 o'clock game. I believe, in Calgary. So go win yourself some tickets. Follow us. Hit the retweet button. That's how you get entered. What else we got, Schoolie? We just got the weekly challenge.
Yep.
All right. I am going to put it in the chat, and you really are going to have till about 9 o'clock tomorrow to fill this out. Thomas, I'm going to give you yours in the private chat here.
So you haven't even sent me mine yet.
Yeah. I think this is the most winnable weekly challenge. It's been pretty hard. It's been well documented. Nobody's won yet. But I think this is really the most winnable one that we've had. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to put my name and email in. You should too, or else we won't know how to get a hold of you when you win. I'll say it again. Same thing I said last week. I'm going to put a Cigar City jersey on the line. So the winner's going to get a Cigar City jersey. All right. 3 games till we meet again next Wednesday. By the way, next Wednesday, we will have a NHL scout, not for the Lightning, for the New Jersey Devils on the show. Jim Mill is going to join the show. He was also a professional goaltender. I talked to him a couple weeks ago. A friend had introduced us. I think it's going to be a really interesting show, a little curveball, change of pace from, just, hardcore, just talking about the Lightning. And I think it'll be really interesting. So come check us out next Wednesday. I think we are doing that at 7 or 8. Follow us on X to find out when. But it's going to be a good show next week. All right. Tomorrow's game is against Calgary. Calgary's a good team again. They're playing well this season. So 9 o'clock start time. Keep an eye out. Maybe I'll be live. Maybe I won't be. Really depends on how I feel at 9 o'clock tomorrow. First question. Does Nick Paul record a point versus the Flames? He just has to get 1 point. It could be a goal. It can be an assist. And Nick Paul is the skater that we're talking about. So does Nick Paul record a point versus the Flames, Thomas Schooley?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go no. I was very upset with Nick Paul last night when he missed that shot right in front of the goalie. He didn't really fan on it, but I don't think he got it up like he wanted to. All right, question number 2. We're going to the Kraken, Seattle this weekend. Yanni Gourde's on the Kraken, a former fan favorite. Does Yanni Gourde score for the Kraken? Schoolie, what say you?
No.
I'm saying no too. Will we notice him? Will he make an impact on the game? Yes. Will he score a goal? And I am talking about scoring a goal, by the way.
I know, that's why I was like score, so that no.
I probably.
By the way, the co-founder and co-owner of the Kraken passed away today, so I think they're going to do some patches they'll be wearing some patches for him.
All right. So you go no, I go no. And then here's probably going to be the hard one. How many points does Braden Point score versus the Blue Jackets? So that is points. That is goals and assists.
2.
Thomas Schooley's going 2. I'm going 1. I'm going to hit submit. Look, we're just like you. We fill out the weekly challenge just like you do. So there you go. Get your entries in now. Let's refresh. Let's see if anyone's actually doing this with us. Yes, but not many. That's all right. We'll tweet it out. You guys can go answer those questions anytime before 7 or 9 tomorrow. Remember, we turn that off once the game starts because once the first game starts, you can't answer those questions. The game's already started. All right. We got everything else. It looks like I'm right's in the house. 3 points. Just going through the chat here because we haven't been too chat active. Kim Ricci is in the house waving. Hey, Kim. And Rajan was in the house. If you guys want some Rays news, you can go watch Invasion on Shooter in the Stash, usually on Tuesday nights around.
Right now they're talking all sports because really, well, the major leagues just started getting started with all the Soto trade, and the Rays finally doing a little bit of something. So actually last week and this week I jumped on for a little bit with them. So we talked some Bucks today, and a little bit of Lightning.
Had Karen out there and Lessa.
I think it's Lisa.
Lisa. Yeah. I suck at speaking. Sorry. And Stephanie. What's up, everyone? And by the way, we're only streaming to 3 places now. Not that anyone was really following us on Twitch to watch the show. But you got to find us on the We the Thunder page, X, or over on YouTube. So those are your 3 options there.
We need to build this YouTube channel. So everybody please go just subscribe to.
Well, I think the problem is it's Shooter in the Stash. I think I got to change the name.
Yeah.
I got to change the name to We the Thunder.
If we get a lot of subscriptions on there, we can get some sponsors and stuff. So we need to grow the YouTube channel. So everybody go.
Yeah, maybe not to spoil it, but guess what? Next week we're giving away more tickets. So wait, don't subscribe to YouTube yet. I don't know an easy way to track that because I'm not very YouTube friendly. But that might be the next ask next week if you want to win yourself some tickets right before the holidays. So yeah, we'll be back next week with Jim Mill, a NHL scout for the New Jersey Devils, and we'll talk to him. I think it's going to be an awesome show. And then we're going to take the following week off. We're taking off for Christmas. Unless Thomas Schooley decides he wants to go live on Christmas night.
I might have a little bit too much eggnog that night.
I
do want to thank everybody that came out last week or this past Sunday to the Thunderbolts Christmas party. We raised some money for Reese Across America for next year to sponsor. They place Reese at the National Cemeteries. I will be at Bay Pines this Saturday at 11 a.m. if anybody wants to join there and lay wreaths on the National Cemeteries. They're doing it at all different cemeteries across the country on Saturday. So if you have another national one near you, look it up. Wreaths Across America. It will tell you what time, what location, or if you want to join me at Bay Pines.
Very good. I'm sorry I missed the party.
Yeah.
Out of town.
They haven't really given any news on Cherny except for he wasn't playing.
Chernak is just always day to day. I mean, the way the guy plays, he's going to get hurt. He'll block any shot. He'll hit anyone. And that's just the kind of player he is. He gets banged up. But I think the good news for the injuries that we currently have, which I guess is just Sorelli and Chernak right now, is they're not saying any of them are like week to week, right? So they're all short-term injuries. So these guys are all going to be back. But like Eric alluded to earlier, like everyone's playing injured. We're a couple months into the season and these guys are banged up. So it's really going to take something significant to take them out of the lineup, which we've seen with several players. So hopefully the Lightning will try to get healthy here. I know they don't really have a break here. I guess you get a little bit of a holiday break. Hopefully that gives them some time to get healthy. And because a lot of these guys won't have that week and a half or 2 weeks off because they'll be playing in the Four Nations face-off in February. So no rest, except for our Russians. Kuch is going to get a nice little rest, and Vasi's going to get a nice little rest. I wonder how much that's really going to help us down the stretch to have those guys fresh. Now we still got 5 other guys that are going to be skating in that tournament, but 2 of our best players are going to have a nice little break. Maybe it hurts us. All right, let's get out of here. Go Go retweet, go win some tickets for the Blue Jackets game on Tuesday. Go buy some gifts. Use our code. This helps us out tremendously. This is our only sponsor this year. So use WTT Pod to get $10 off your first time using SeatGeek.com. Not just on Lightning tickets. I bought some concert tickets on there last week. So use that. Help us out. And follow us on the socials. Get on Thunderbolts on Facebook. And until next time, we'll be back next Wednesday night. This has been We the Thunder. Don't forget to be the Thunder.
That's it?